You're listening to Trace Hunt Radio. We explore the darkest chapters of true crime, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and the twisted minds behind them. Follow the blood, chase the clues, uncover the truth. Stay sharp. The hunt begins now.
On a warm summer night, the city carnival was alive with music, laughter, and the smell of cotton candy. Families wandered the stalls, teenagers screamed on the rides, and in the heart of it all stood the mirror maze, a glittering labyrinth of glass and light that promised fun, confusion, and maybe a little disorientation. But just after 9 p.m., the screams inside weren't from amusement. A young woman staggered out of the maze, clutching her stomach before collapsing on the midway. She'd been stabbed, fatally. Security rushed to check the CCTV footage from the maze's overhead cameras. It was grainy, distorted by reflections, but one frame stood out, a man's face, cold and expressionless, appearing behind the victim in a hall of mirrors. Investigators froze the image, ran it through facial recognition, and got a shocking result. The system identified him instantly, but there was a problem. That man had been declared dead 20 years ago. Was it a glitch? A twin? A ghost? Or had a killer returned from the grave to finish unfinished business? Tonight, we're going inside the investigation. The lies, the secrets, the forensic breakthroughs, to uncover the truth about the man who shouldn't exist. Chapter 1. The Night of the Carnival. The city carnival came only once a year, and on that night in late August, the downtown park had transformed into a glowing wonderland. Strings of colored bulbs swung overhead, casting pools of red, blue, and gold across the cracked pavement. Vendors hawked fried dough and caramel apples. The Ferris wheel turned slow and steady against the summer sky, and the tinny melody of an old carousel spilled out over the laughter of the crowd. At the heart of it all stood the mirror maze, a temporary structure assembled from gleaming panels of tempered glass and polished metal frames. From the outside, it was a glittering cube of light, its entrance crowned with a neon sign that flickered between funhouse and mirror maze as if it couldn't make up its mind. The maze was designed to disorient. Tight corridors, sudden turns, infinite reflections. It was a place where you could lose your friends for minutes at a time, or lose track of yourself. Around 8:45 p.m., Emily Carter, 26, a graphic designer with a shy smile and a love for photography, stepped into the maze alone. She had been at the carnival with coworkers, but had wandered off, camera in hand, curious about how the lights might play against the glass. Witnesses later recalled seeing her at the entrance, adjusting her hair and stepping inside without hesitation. The maze swallowed her whole. 15 minutes later, the music outside was pierced by a single chilling scream. It was sharp enough to cut through the din of games and rides, followed by frantic shouting. Carnival goers turned toward the maze's exit as Emily stumbled out, clutching her abdomen. Her white sundress bloomed red as she collapsed onto the asphalt. Within seconds, chaos erupted. A security guard knelt beside her, calling for medics, while others radioed for police. She kept trying to say something, one witness recalled later, but it was like her mouth couldn't catch up to her breathing. The only word I caught was mirror. Inside the maze, the lights kept flickering. Carnival staff ushered guests out of the structure, locking the entrance. Police arrived within minutes, securing the scene and beginning a sweep of the maze's twisting corridors. They found no weapon, no obvious blood trail, only the warped reflections of themselves in glass. By 9:30 p.m., Emily was pronounced dead at St. Mary's Hospital. The cause, a single deep stab wound to the abdomen. Whoever had attacked her had slipped away unnoticed into the crowd. Detective Lena Morales of the city's violent crimes unit arrived at the carnival just after 10 p.m. She was meticulous, sharp-eyed, and had an instinct for reading crime scenes like unfinished sentences. Walking through the maze, she noted how the glass seemed to distort distance and movement. "You could have 100 witnesses in here," she murmured, "and none of them would see the same thing." But there was one advantage: the maze's overhead CCTV. Small cameras were mounted in the corners above the glass panels, meant more for security against vandalism than for solving murders. That night, those cameras would become the case's lifeline. When technicians pulled the footage, they found what they expected: Emily wandering the maze, pausing to take photos, sometimes smiling faintly at her own reflection. Then at 8:57 p.m., a man appeared behind her just for a few seconds. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face pale under the maze's cold white light. The reflection warped slightly, but the features were distinct: deep-set eyes, a narrow jaw, and an expression as unreadable as stone. And then he was gone. Chapter 2: The Face in the Glass. The grainy clip was just 12 seconds long, but in those seconds, Detective Morales saw something she couldn't let go. The man in the reflection wasn't moving with Emily. He wasn't beside her. Instead, his image seemed to hover a few paces behind, half concealed by a panel that multiplied his outline into a phantom army. In one angle, his face was distorted, but when Emily took a step and the glass shifted, it appeared again, sharper, clearer, almost close enough to touch. Morales leaned closer to the monitor. "Pause it, right there." The technician froze the frame, the Carnival's neon bleeding into the glass around the man's head. Morales pointed at the eyes. "Enhanced just enough to keep detail." It wasn't Hollywood magic. The picture stayed somewhat blurry, but the structure of the face was intact. The squared jaw, the distinct widow's peak, the slight scar on the left cheek. He wasn't looking at Emily. He was looking straight into the mirror, which meant straight into the camera. It was as if he knew it was there. The footage was run through FRS, automated facial recognition software, cross-referencing thousands of mugshots, missing persons files, and driver's licenses. Morales expected nothing. Too many reflections, too much distortion. But within minutes, the technician turned, eyes wide. Got a hit. The name flashed on screen: Daniel Harper. Morales frowned. She knew the name. Everyone in the department did. Harper had been a local urban legend, the charming young man who vanished in 2003 after being accused in the disappearance of his fiancée. Officially, his body had been found 2 years later in a burned-out cabin upstate, dental records confirming the match. Case closed. Or so they thought. The room went silent. "That's impossible," another officer muttered. Morales didn't say anything. Instead, she printed the still frame and pinned it to the caseboard. In thick marker, she wrote across the top, "Who is he now?" The next morning, she visited the property file for the burned cabin where Harper's body had supposedly been recovered. The photos were black and white, grainy. She noted something off. The skull in the images was missing the exact dental work Harper had in his records. A note buried in the coroner's report said mild inconsistencies were found, but dismissed as heat-related damage. A hunch began to harden into something sharper. If Harper had faked his death, where had he been hiding for 2 decades? And why return in public to a crowded carnival? Morales interviewed carnival staff. The maze operator that night, a wiry man named Greg, swore he'd seen no one suspicious. "It's chaos in there. People bump into each other, lose track of where they are. You could walk right past someone with a knife and think it's part of the show." 2 teenage attendants mentioned a man buying a ticket with cash, wearing a plain black hoodie pulled low. Neither could recall his face. In a carnival, faces blur into a sea of strangers. But one woman, a food vendor near the maze, offered something chilling. "I saw him," she said, glancing at the still photo. "He bought a lemonade from me, real polite, quiet. But he kept looking at himself in the mirror on my cart, not at me. Like he wanted to make sure he still looked right." The investigation now had a paradox. If the man was Harper, he'd been dead for 20 years. If he wasn't, then someone alive had Harper's exact face. Morales requested a new analysis, forensic facial aging in reverse. Instead of asking, who could this be in 20 years? The program asked, who would Harper have looked like if he'd never died? The result was near identical to the reflection in the glass. It was enough for Morales to reopen Harper's file as active. But that also meant unsealing all the dirt buried with it. The fiancé's disappearance, the family disputes, and whispers of other women who'd gone missing in his orbit. And if Harper really was alive, Morales knew one thing for sure. Emily Carter wasn't his first victim. Chapter 3. The Ghost of 2003. In 2003, Daniel Harper was the kind of man people remembered, and not just for his looks. At 27, he had the kind of charisma that made bartenders remember his drink order and neighbors wave from their porches. He worked as a freelance carpenter, built stage sets for the local theater, and volunteered at community events. He wasn't the most successful man in town, but he had a way of making people feel seen, and for a while that made him almost untouchable. Then came Claire Weston. Claire was a school teacher, known for her neat dresses and bright laugh. Friends described her relationship with Harper as storybook in the beginning. Late-night walks, home-cooked dinners, plans for a future together. But in March of that year, she vanished. She left no note, took no clothes, and drained none of her bank accounts. Her car was found at the edge of Pike's Forest, keys still in the ignition. The last person to see her alive? Daniel Harper. At first, Harper was cooperative. He told police they'd argued that night, that she'd stormed out, and he hadn't followed her. His story was clean, even sympathetic, until investigators pulled his phone records. They showed several calls to Claire's cell in the early hours after she left, followed by his phone being switched off for 6 hours. That 6-hour gap became the focus of the investigation. Search teams combed Pike's Forest for weeks. Volunteers hung flyers, the media camped outside Harper's small rental house, and speculation turned into a steady roar. Then, a hiker found a torn scrap of floral fabric deep in the woods. DNA confirmed it was from Claire's dress the night she disappeared. But without a body, prosecutors couldn't press murder charges. The case hung in limbo, and Harper stayed free. 2 years later, a fire destroyed a hunting cabin 80 miles north. Inside the ruins, authorities found human remains, badly burned, almost unrecognizable. The local coroner, working with limited resources, identified the remains as Harper's based on consistent dental records and a watch engraved with his initials. The official cause of death was accidental fire. Case closed. Harper was gone. But not everyone bought the story. Detective Morales, fresh out of the academy back then, had read the file years later as part of a cold case review. She remembered thinking the dental confirmation was too casual, too trusting. You don't just disappear, get found burned, and have everything tie up neatly, she told a colleague once. The Claire Weston case faded from headlines. Her parents moved out of state. Harper became a cautionary tale told in whispers at bars. The guy who might have done it but got away by dying. Now, in 2023, Morales stood in the evidence archive, pulling dusty boxes labeled with Claire's name. Inside were photographs. Harper and Claire at a picnic, Harper on stage building a set, Harper in a police interview room leaning back in his chair with that easy smile. Same face, same eyes, same scar. The question wasn't just whether Harper had killed Emily Carter in the mirror maze. The question was how many years he'd spent in the shadows, and who else might be buried in that darkness. Chapter 4, Tracing the Dead Man. Detective Morales knew that finding a man officially declared dead was like chasing smoke. You had to look for where the air shifted, not where the fire had been. The first stop was the paper trail. She requested Harper's official death certificate, which was thin, a single-page document citing dental confirmation and a fire investigation report. No autopsy photographs, no full forensic dental charts. Just a notarized signature from a small-town coroner. That coroner, now retired, was living in Arizona. Morales called him. His voice was raspy, defensive. "I stand by my report," he said. "The fire destroyed most of the body. But the teeth matched. That's all I needed." "Matched exactly?" Morales pressed. A pause. Close enough. You see that kind of damage, you learn not to nitpick. Close enough. Those two words stuck in her head like glass splinters. Next, she traced Harper's finances. His bank accounts had been drained months before his death, the last withdrawal a hefty cash sum from a branch in another county. The account was closed the same week. She dug deeper, property records, shell companies, anything. One lead emerged, a small cabin purchased under a fake name in rural Montana in 2004. The deed holder's signature, when compared to Harper's old driver's license, had enough similarities to raise suspicion. Morales contacted the county sheriff there. That place has been empty for years, he told her. But a neighbor remembers a man who kept to himself, dark hair, scar on his cheek. Drove a beat-up pickup. Paid cash for everything. From there, she combed through unofficial sightings, old tips logged in the missing persons database. Most were noise, but two stood out. 2009 Denver. Colorado, a bartender reported serving a man who looked like Harper, though older, heavier. The man paid in cash and left quickly when asked if he was from around there. 2015 Portland, Oregon. A gas station clerk said a man matching Harper's description asked for directions to a ferry terminal. The clerk remembered because the man kept glancing at the store's security camera, almost like he wanted to avoid it catching his face. In both cases, the sightings were dismissed at the time. After all, Harper was dead. Morales also examined the years before the carnival. She noticed a gap in Emily Carter's life that made her stomach tighten. 6 months before her murder, Emily had traveled to a rural fair in Washington state, a small event eerily similar to the carnival where she died. Records showed she'd entered a mirror house attraction there. Had Harper been following her long before the final night? Or had Emily unknowingly crossed his path twice? She reached out to Claire Weston's parents. They were hesitant. Decades of grief had calcified into a weary distrust of police promises. But when Morales mentioned Harper's name, Mrs. Weston's voice sharpened. If you've really seen him, if he's still out there, don't stop. He ruined our lives once. Don't let him ruin another family. They sent Morales a box of Claire's things, journals, photos, letters. One journal entry from the week before her disappearance sent a chill through her. Danny's been strange lately. Keeps looking at me in the mirror, like he's memorizing my face. Says reflections tell you who a person really is. Back at her desk, Morales pinned the carnival photo beside a 2003 snapshot of Harper. She stepped back. 2 decades apart, 2 sets of eyes, but the same calculating stare. She now had enough circumstantial evidence to believe Harper was alive. What she didn't have was proof, not yet. That would require baiting a man who'd already vanished once, and making sure this time he couldn't disappear again. Chapter 5, Setting the Trap. Detective Morales knew that to catch a man like Harper, you had to give him something he couldn't resist, and in his case, that was mirrors. From every interview, every scrap of Claire's journal, every carnival worker's observation, one detail repeated like a drumbeat. Harper had a fascination with reflections. It wasn't vanity. It was control. He seemed to enjoy watching people's unease when confronted with their own image, as if he could see something they couldn't. That made the mirror maze not just a crime scene, but bait. Morales contacted the carnival company that had hosted the attraction. They were reluctant. The murder had tanked their ticket sales, but with pressure from city officials, they agreed to help. The mirror maze would return for a special fall festival, rebuilt exactly as it had been on the night of Emily Carter's death. Only this time it was wired like Fort Knox. Tiny cameras were embedded in corners where no visitor could see them. Heat sensors were placed to detect any unusual loitering in the corridors. And unlike the grainy carnival security footage, these feeds would stream in high definition, monitored in real time by Morales' team. They needed a lure. The department hired an undercover officer, Detective Hannah Liu, who bore a passing resemblance to Emily. Same build, same hair length, same kind of bright red scarf Emily had worn that night. Her role was to wander the carnival, acting casually lost, and eventually make her way into the mirror maze. The theory was simple. If Harper was still in the area, if the maze was his hunting ground, he might try again. The night of the sting, the festival buzzed with life. Children clutched caramel apples, rides spun under strings of white lights, and the smell of fried dough drifted on the crisp autumn air. Morales sat in a mobile command van, eyes glued to the bank of monitors. At 8:43 p.m., Detective Liu entered the mirror maze. Her wire picked up her steady breathing and the occasional crunch of footsteps on the carpeted floor. Visual on main corridor, Morales' tech whispered into the headset. Then movement. A man in a dark jacket slipped in through the maze's side entrance, bypassing the ticket booth. His pace was slow, deliberate. Every few steps, he paused, glancing at his reflection as if checking his disguise. Even through the high-definition feed, Morales felt the air shift. The scar, the jawline, Harper. Inside, Liu stopped at a dead end, pretending to study her reflection. Harper's figure emerged in the glass behind her, once, twice, 3 times, as mirrors multiplied him. He moved closer, almost gliding, until he was just 2 panels away. "Hold your position," Morales whispered into Liu's earpiece. For a moment, Harper didn't strike. Instead, he raised his hand, palm flat against the mirror, watching Liu's reflection mimic the gesture. It was as if he wanted to see her react before deciding. That hesitation was his undoing. The entry teams moved fast, splitting into 2 groups to block every possible exit. Harper sensed movement, his reflection flinched, and he bolted, darting into a twisting corridor. But the maze that had once hidden him now betrayed him. Every turn was covered, every corner filmed, every mirror a trap showing him the closing net. At 8:51 p.m., Harper slammed into 2 plainclothes officers stationed at the emergency exit. They wrestled him to the ground. In his jacket pocket, they found a folding knife and a small vial of chloroform. When Morales approached, Harper looked up at her through the tangle of arms holding him down, and he smiled. "Took you long enough," he said. Chapter 6. Unmasking the Past. They booked him under the name he gave, Daniel Cole, and printed him under the name they knew, Daniel Harper. In the fluorescent hush of interview 3, Detective Lena Morales let the recorder ping alive and did the thing good interrogators do. She built a staircase made of facts and invited him to walk down it himself. "State your name for the record." "Daniel Cole." "Say it again," she said, and slid the mirror maze arrest photo across the table left profile. Right profile, the faint crescent scar on his cheek like a signature. He smiled, not defiant, not rattled. Curious, as if she were a puzzle he planned to finish later. "You've had 20 years, Morales said softly. "I only need 1 night." "The corpse that wasn't..." While Harper stared at the table, the case machine spun outside the room. By dawn, a court order authorized exhumation of the Harper remains from the 2005 cabin fire. The county's small cemetery gave up a heavy, sealed vault that had never been opened since burial. In the state lab, Dr. Mara Iqbal, on loan from the EMEA's office for this case, oversaw a fresh exam. Dentition. 2 restorations in the mandible did not match Harper's dental charts from 2003 wrong material. Wrong margins. Sex estimation, male, yes. Age at death skewed older than Harper was then. mtDNA, pulled from a dense segment of femur compared to a cheek swab from Harper's mother, no maternal match. It wasn't him. The confirmation in 2005 had leaned on a watch engraved DH and a coroner's close enough call. Now the science said the quiet part out loud. Someone had placed an unidentified man in that cabin and led a town. Believe a story that closed a file. Morales pushed the exhumation notice, dental overlays, and mtDNA summary across the interview table. "You left a stranger in that fire," she said. "Who was he?" Harper's eyes ticked once to the page, then back to Morales. "You're the detective," he said. It wasn't a denial. Mirrors and stagecraft. They went the other direction work. Harper's hands told a story even when his mouth didn't. Calloused palms. A faint epoxy smear at the cuticle, a scar under the thumbnail common to people who score glass. CSU lifted microscopic glass dust, soda lime, with an iron impurity typical of tempered Carnival panels from the cuffs of his jacket seized during the sting. Morales traced a neat, ugly timeline on the whiteboard. 2004 to 2007. Cash jobs in the rural Northwest under the name Cole. Receipts for mirrors, aluminum channel, acrylic adhesives from 2 wholesalers who remembered a tight-lipped buyer with a scar. 2008 to 2015. Seasonal contracts with pop-up attractions not on payroll. Paid via vendor sub-sub arrangements that kept his name off W2 South. He learned maze layouts, camera blind spots, emergency exits wired before final inspections. 2016 to 2023, he moved with the Carnival circuit, new cities, same nays. Harper's former World Theater's sets had a twin in the traveling fair. He brought craft and obsession to a place built on misdirection. He knew how reflections layered. He knew where sightlines died. And he knew how to watch. Why Emily? The motive for Emily Carter crystallized in a single email buried in her freelance archive. Emily, a designer and avid street photographer, had a small portfolio site. 6 months before her murder, on a trip she'd taken to a Washington State fair, she'd uploaded an image she titled Infinite Paths, a corridor of glass with light leaking in like ribbons. In the far background, a sliver of a man's face half hidden by a seam stared forward. Most viewers would never notice. Emily had, in a blog note beneath the photo she'd written, "The maze designer walked like a shadow. He checked his reflection more than the visitors did." 3 days after that upload, the site received a takedown request from an anonymized address citing copyright infringement for photographing a proprietary layout. Emily ignored it. She wasn't showing the route, only a mood. A week later, the ISP log showed a scraper hit her gallery from a VPN node used frequently near Carnival winter storage lots. "Emily photographed you," Morales said in interview 3, laying the print beside the Carnival still. The eyes were the same in miniature. He didn't look at it. He looked at the mirror bolted high in the corner for officer safety. For half a second, his gaze warmed recognition without affection, then cooled. "You follow patterns," Morales said. She liked reflections. "You like people who look at themselves. The maze made the rest easy." He said nothing. Claire's handwriting echoed. To fold Claire Weston into the present, you could either swing for drama or lay down the quiet parallels. Morales chose the second. From Claire's journals, CSU had already flagged the entry. "He keeps looking at me in the mirror, like he's memorizing my face." A second line, scribbled a day later, had felt mundane at the time. "He took me to the fair to see the lights." There was a carnival in 2003. There was a maze then too, smaller, cruder. The details sat in a throwaway event calendar from the local paper. Morales set Claire's line beside Emily's blog note. 2 decades apart. Same activity, same fixation. Different ending only because one woman vanished into woods and the other fell into a crowd. What tied them wasn't just Harper. It was mirrors, the place where he rehearsed a gaze, calibrated a face, and practiced erasure. The helper, the corpse, the fire. The cabin fire still needed a body. The exhumed man's jaw showed a healed fracture fixed years prior with a cheap non-US plate, the kind often used in clinics abroad. Databases flickered. One missing person report from 2004 surfaced. A seasonal worker, male, mid-40s, last seen near a rail yard 2 counties from the cabin, with a history of alcohol use and no local family. The coroner in 2005 had flagged identification consistent because a watch with DAH sat on a charred wrist, and because a paper driver's license half melted in the wall declared a name. Both objects were planted. The county's evidence photos, scanned badly, still caught a weirdness. The license laminate lacked the state's microprint for that year. The watch's engraving font wasn't one the local jeweler used. Who helps a man do that? A quiet mortuary assistant in that county, 23 at the time, had since moved twice and changed his last name. On a 2005 timesheet, he'd signed for overtime the night the Harper remains arrived. CSU pulled his phone records from storage. A flurry of calls that night to a burner in the cabin's zip code. Morales and Byrne knocked on his apartment door 2 days after the sting. He opened, saw the badges, and sagged like a tent with the poles pulled. "I didn't know who the dead man was," he said in a voice that wanted to be brave and could only manage tired. "He was already dead when I got there." He said, the assistant faltered, corrected, the other man said it would help a family say goodbye. "He paid me to get the paperwork through. He had the watch and the license." "I'm sorry. I should have asked better questions." He pled to tampering and conspiracy. In exchange, he gave them what they needed. A pickup's plate scribbled on a sticky note from that night, and a description of a scarred cheek. They had their body plan, their helper, their lie. And they had the man who profited most from being declared ash. Evidence that breathes. Harper's arrest kit yielded more than a knife and a chloroform vial. On the folding knife, no blood, he cleaned obsessively, but a micro nick on the edge. Toolmark analysis later aligned that nick with the defect found in the wound channel of a ballistic gel block. The lab cut to test class characteristics. It didn't identify the knife uniquely, but it pinned edge geometry to method. On the vial, latent prints consistent with Harper. Trace residue of chloroform stabilized with ethanol and a denaturant sold in small. Lots only to a handful of laboratory supply houses. One invoice paid in cash went to a shell drop box rented by D. Cole. The CCTV over that mailbox caught a man with a cap brim pulled low and a mirror in his hand, which he used to watch the door behind him while he retrieved the parcel. On his phone, few texts, fewer contacts. But he kept one thing, a folder of maze diagrams, not quite maps, more like light plans, where glare blinded cameras. Where reflections created infinite corridors. Where a person could stand outside a camera's cone yet appear inside its view because physics loved to fold images in on themselves. He'd learned to be a ghost inside reflection. The leverage he didn't expect. In interview 3, Morales placed one last item on the table, a print from the sting's high-def feed, not of his face, not of his watch, but of his hand on the glass. The gel lift from that panel had pulled a chemical signature skin oil, trace chloroform, and the same tempered glass dust found in his cuffs. The cocktail wasn't unique, but it repeated wherever he touched. "You built a trail out of things you don't think about," she said. "Not DNA. Habits. What you buy. Where you stand. How you breathe when you lean into a mirror." He studied the print, not the science. His gaze caught him a faint warp at the edge, the way a curve bent a straight line. He seemed to approve of the composition. It was the closest thing to confession she was going to get that day. "Claire," Morales said, shifting the air. "Where is she?" Silence grew roots. "You survived 20 years by making sure questions died first. That ends now." He blinked once, slow. "In the woods," he said finally, voice almost bored. "You'll never find her." Morales didn't flinch. "You rehearsed that line once already," she said. "We found Emily's killer by reading glass. We can read trees." He leaned back, an old smile wandering up like a habit. "Try," threading the cases. They didn't need his directions to prove murder in Emily's case. They had clock, place, intent, instrumentality. But to close Claire's, to pull a ghost into the light, they needed either a body or a map. Harper had already given them the latter without meaning to. His mirror fetish embedded in everything, including the woods. In 2003, he'd driven Claire to Pikes Forest, where certain water pools act like outdoor. Mirrors a fact noted in a photographer's blog from that year. On a topo map, Morales marked the springs and old quarry pits that hold still water most months. She circled a cluster reachable in a 6-hour window, the gap in Harper's phone log that first made him interesting. "You like reflections," she said to the case board later, not to him. "You'd bury where the world looks back." Search teams planned routes. Inside the interview room, Morales capped her pen. "We're done for now," she said, standing. As she reached the door, Harper spoke, not to stop her. but like a man who couldn't resist a mirror on the way out. "Detective," he said, "when you stand in the maze, do you look for yourself or for the exits?" She didn't turn. "I look for the camera," she said, "because it remembers what you wish it didn't." The latch clicked. Chapter 7, Glass and Water. Detective Morales had heard it before. Killers saying, "You'll never find her," as if the declaration itself could make it true. But Harper wasn't like other killers. He didn't bury for convenience, he buried for design. The theory was simple. Harper's life revolved around reflections. Mirrors in carnivals, glass in mazes, even water in woods. If he disposed of Claire Weston, he likely chose a place where the surface looked back at him, mapping the reflections. Morales called on Sergeant Burr, who handled the department's drone unit. "Forget metal detectors," she told him. "I want every standing body of water in Pike's Forest scanned, ponds, springs, quarry pits, even large puddles if they've been there for years." They started with historical topographic maps from 2003 and layered them with satellite imagery from today. 24 reflective surfaces appeared, but Morales wasn't looking for just water. She wanted patterns. One quarry pit, unused since the 1980s, drew her attention. It was a perfect oval, hidden in a fold of the land, surrounded by pines so dense you could stand 20 feet from the rim and never know it was there. Its still surface would mirror the trees year-round. The 6-hour window, the quarry pit fit the timeline. Harper's phone was off for 6 hours the night Claire vanished. Driving from his house to the pit, dumping a body waited for submersion, and returning without detection could be done in just under 5. That left an hour unaccounted for, enough to clean up and create an alibi. Morales circled it on the map. "This is where we start. Water that keeps secrets." On the first search day, the air was sharp, pine needles slick with morning frost. The quarry's water was black in the center, green-brown near the edges where algae clung to old stone. Burr's drone hovered above, sending live video to the command tent. "Water clarity's poor," Burr muttered. "We'll need sonar." A portable side-scan sonar unit was lowered from an inflatable raft. As it swept the quarry floor, strange shapes emerged, boulders, fallen logs, and one anomaly about 10 feet from the south wall. It was smooth, elongated, and sat half buried in silt. The shape had dimensions consistent with a human body in the fetal position. Bringing up the past, divers went in the next morning. Visibility was less than 3 feet. They moved slowly, silt clouding with every motion. The lead diver's voice crackled through the radio. "Contact! We've got fabric!" It was a fragment of faded cotton, patterned in pale flowers, the same fabric Claire's torn dress had been made from, according to DNA from the scrap found in 2003. Minutes later, the diver surfaced with a large, sealed bundle wrapped in heavy tarp and wire. Inside, skeletal remains lay curled, still clothed. Around the neck, a thin metal chain with a charm in the shape of a book. Claire's students had given it to her the year she went missing. The chain and charm were intact. The teeth matched her dental chart exactly. DNA from the bone confirmed it. Telling the Westons, Morales drove out herself. She didn't send uniforms or call on the phone. Claire's parents stood in the doorway, both older than she remembered from their file photos. When she said, "We found her," Mrs. Weston's hands went to her mouth, and Mr. Weston just closed his eyes. "She's coming home," Morales said. Mrs. Weston's voice trembled. "You'll make him pay." Morales nodded. "For both of them." Leveraging the find. Finding Claire's body meant Harper could now be tied to her murder and Emily Carter's in the same jurisdiction. Prosecutors could link the two under a pattern of behavior, luring victims into environments where reflections disoriented them, then killing and disposing of the bodies with precision. The forensic team added another chilling layer. Small traces of tempered glass were embedded in the folds of Claire's dress. It wasn't from the quarry. It was consistent with Carnival mirror panels, suggesting Harper had transported her in a space where glass shards had already been present. This detail, though small, would prove devastating in court. The confrontation. When Morales returned to the interview room with the quarry photos, Harper studied them longer than she expected. His expression didn't crack, but his hands stilled on the table. "You put her where you could see her," Morales said. "Every time you looked at the water, she looked back." He said nothing, but his jaw tightened. "You built a world of mirrors, Harper," she continued. "But every mirror is a window from the other side. And now we're on your side of the glass." Chapter 8. The Trial of 2 Decades. The courthouse in Granton had seen its share of high-profile cases, but nothing like this, a double murder trial stretching across 20 years, tethered by glass and shadows. Harper's defense team knew the stakes. If the jury believed Morales' theory that Claire Weston's and Emily Carter's deaths were part of a single, obsessive pattern, Harper would never walk free again. If they didn't, there was still a chance the older case might crumble under the weight of time. Building the reflection narrative. Prosecutor Dana Koenig was methodical. She didn't just lay out facts, she built a world for the jury. She began with Claire Weston's last known night, the evening of August 2003, painting the picture of a woman lured into an isolated space by a man who understood how to disorient her. Then she brought in the discovery of the quarry, the sonar scans, the divers, the floral dress. The book-shaped charm was placed on the evidence. Table under a spotlight, a tangible connection between the past and present. Koenig pivoted to Emily Carter's murder. She played the Carnival CCTV footage side by side with stills from Claire's mirror maze visits in 2003. The settings were eerily similar. Twisting corridors of reflections, an unseen figure always at the periphery. Her voice was calm but heavy. The defendant didn't just kill them, he designed their deaths. He built the stage, placed his actors, and watched from the other side of the glass. The defense strikes back. Harper's attorney, Raymond Voss, tried to dismantle the mirror obsession narrative. He argued that the carnival was a public space, the quarry a known hangout for teens and campers. The glass fragments on Claire's dress, he claimed, could have been from an unrelated incident. His strategy was to frame Harper as a man with bad luck and unfortunate associations, not a predator. "The state wants you to believe in ghosts," Voss told the jury. "A man dead on paper for 20 years, risen only to fit their story." Morales takes the stand. Koenig knew Morales would be her anchor witness. Morales walked the jury through every investigative step, from the moment Emily collapsed on the midway to the sonar ping in the quarry. She explained how Harper's supposed death in 2003 was never backed by a body, only a staged accident report from a fire that conveniently destroyed identification records. Voss tried to rattle her. "Detective, isn't it true that your case rests on the assumption that my client has a psychological fixation on mirrors?" Morales didn't flinch. "No," she said. "It rests on the fact that his fingerprints are on the knife that killed Emily Carter, and Claire Weston's remains were found in a quarry his family owned." The moment that broke him. The prosecution's final card was the interrogation footage. The jury watched Harper in the interview room, silent as Morales laid down photo after photo, Claire's dress, Emily's scarf, the quarry from above, the mirror maze at night. Then came the diver's photograph of Claire's body curled in the tarp. Harper's eyes lingered, just a fraction longer than before. The jurors saw it. Koenig saw it. "That's the look of recognition," Koenig told them in closing. "That's the look of a man seeing his own reflection." Verdict: the jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Harper was found guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Claire Weston, first-degree murder of Emily Carter. Concealment of a corpse. When the judge read the sentence, 2 consecutive life terms without parole, Harper's only reaction was a slow, measured blink, as if this was just another turn in the maze he had built for himself. Aftermath. Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Weston clutched Morales' hands. "You found her," she whispered. "You brought her back." Morales nodded, but her gaze shifted to the courthouse doors, where Harper was being let out in cuffs. The glass of the lobby reflected him in duplicate. 2 Harpers walking side by side, fading into the sunlight. For a man obsessed with mirrors, there would be none in his cell. Chapter 9. The Carnival returns. The carnival came back the next summer because that's what carnivals do. They fold themselves into trailers, winter over under tarps and pine sap, and then bloom again on fresh asphalt as if nothing bad has ever happened under their lights. Detective Lena Morales didn't come for ceremony. She came alone and unannounced on a Wednesday at dusk, when the midway was only half-awake game hawkers tuning their patter, the Ferris wheel testing its brakes, a cotton candy drum humming like a small thundercloud. She stood beyond the ticket line and watched the mirror maze glow from within, the sign scrubbed and repainted, the entrance flanked by a new placard in block letters. No bags, nitrogen monoxide hoods, clear pathways, 24/7 video. Clean rules, learn the hard way. The maze operator recognized her, or recognized the weight of law and posture if not face. He nodded once, a quiet gratitude, and lifted the rope. She stepped inside. The mirrors were spotless. They always are at opening. The air smelled faintly of Windex and warm carpet. The maze had been reconfigured since the Sting's same footprint. New corridors, a different language of turns, but the physics never changes. Light tucked itself into corners. Reflections multiplied until a single woman became 6 and then 12, all breathing in time. Morales walked slowly, palm open and hovering inches from the glass, the way museum guards do around a priceless frame. She wasn't looking for exits. She wasn't even looking for herself. She was looking for the story the building told when it thought no one was listening. It surprised her how quickly her mind rebuilt the investigation as she moved. The 12-second clip of Emily pausing to photograph a flare of neon. The first frozen still of a face in glass that a computer called Harper before anyone dared to. The boxy white glare of the command van monitors. The sound of Hannah Lou's steady breath over a wire while a shadow approached behind her. The sudden physics of momentum when teams converged and the maze, designed for confusion, became a funnel. She reached a T-junction and stopped. The structure around her threw dim copies of her stance down 3 hallways. In one reflection, her shoulders squared differently. In another, her mouth seemed not to belong to her face. She understood again what he had liked about this. Mirrors give you rehearsal takes. You can practice being anyone until it's hard to remember the original. She pressed 2 fingers to the glass where his palm had once hovered in front of Hannah. The panel was cool. In the high corner, a camera pinpricked red. It recorded without drama an impartial witness that never gets bored. A boy of about 8 spun around a corner and almost barreled into her. He startled, grinned, apologized, then dashed on, his reflection skittering ahead like a fish. His mother laughed 2 quarters away. Morales smiled back before she remembered and then let the expression stay. Buildings deserve to be used for what they're for when the harm has been taken out of them. At the next bend, she found the maze's guts, an emergency exit newly wired with a hard interlock 2 keys, 2 hands, a sounder that would wake the dead. On the wall, a clean plastic board held lockout tags clipped by number. Someone had learned. Someone had written AMK in small letters on the back of the tag for the main breaker, and beneath it, a date. It wasn't the same case, not the same town, but the echo made her throat tight for a moment. Good practices travel in a way the bad ones always did first. She finished the loop and stepped back onto the midway as dusk finally committed to night. The bulbs came on all at once like a confession. The Ferris wheel lit its spokes. The carousel organ found its tune. She watched a young couple take a selfie in the spill of light and adjust the angle, trying to tame the brightness until the reflection in the phone matched the version of themselves they wanted to carry forward. It wasn't sinister, it was human. The trick had always been what a person did with the power to edit an image. At a picnic table near the lemonade stand, she found Hannah Lou, off-duty, hair in a messy bun, a corn dog in one hand and a notebook in the other. Detectives never really put the notebook down. "You came," Hannah said, scooting her tray. "Had to see if it still held a charge," Morales said, nodding toward the maze. Hannah followed her gaze. "Feels different. Like a room that used to leak and now you can't hear the wind anymore." They sat without talking for a while, listening to the carnival tune itself. A teen with a broom swept bottle caps into a dustpan. The ring-toss man practiced his throw, landing a clean ring with a small, satisfied breath. A couple of officers on foot patrol drifted by, nodding casually at nothing in particular. The city had muscle memory now. Radios that stayed charged, exits that stayed clear, cameras that fed into places where humans actually watched. You ever think about how thin the proof was at first? Hannah asked finally. A reflection. A scar. A guy who might have died but didn't. She shook her head like a dog shaking off rain. I don't know how you avoided going full gut and burning the case. I wanted to 24 times. Morales peeled a napkin and rolled it into a careful rope. We didn't avoid gut, she said. We audited it. We let it make a hypothesis and then made it pass clocks and paper. The rest was physics being stubborn, Hannah grinned. Physics is my favorite witness. It doesn't care about charisma, Morales said. Or alibis. Or that a town wants a story to be over. A shadow fell across the table. The maze operator stood there, hat in hand the way men used to take hats off in churches. He didn't fidget, didn't make a speech. He held out a small square wrapped in brown paper and tape. We found this when we rebuilt the panels, he said. Fell out of the old frame when we cut it down. Figured you should have it. Morales unwrapped it. Inside lay a mirror shard, safety film intact, edges dulled by time. Nothing special. A triangle of tempered glass no bigger than her palm. But when she lifted it, the midway folded into a neat, bright slice. Bulbs, a piece of Ferris wheel. The corner of the maze, her own eye. Keep it, he said. I don't want the old angles. When he left, Hannah leaned in. Souvenir? Reminder, Morales said, setting it carefully on the table. Not to trust what seems complete because it fits in a hand. Her phone buzzed. A text from Koenig, the prosecutor. State Supreme Court denied appeal. Life stands. We're done. Morales typed back a thumbs up, and then after a second, thank you. She wasn't sentimental about process, but she respected it enough to say grace when it held. Across the midway, a small ceremony formed at the maze entrance. No microphones, just a dozen carnival workers in a loose semicircle. The foreman said something Morales couldn't hear. One by one, they clipped their ID lanyards to a small hook under the 24/7 video placard and back again. A quiet rehearsal of accountability. It took 20 seconds. They disbanded. The night breathed. Closure? Hannah asked. Morales looked at the shard, at the maze, at the way the lights doubled in the glass, and then studied. Closure is for books, she said. We get maintenance. Hannah laughed. True, but I'll take maintenance over mystery. They finished the corn dog and bought 2 lemonades from the vendor who had once noticed a man watching himself in a cart-mounted mirror. She recognized Morales and, in a small transaction of solidarity, refused their money. My house, she said, for bringing the right kind of mirror. They walked the midway once more. At the games row, kids tried to win stuffed animals they'd forget by morning. Near the stage, a cover band found harmony on its 3rd chord. A little girl tugged her father toward the maze, and he hesitated instinct, memory then saw the camera dot blink, the rules sign, the clean glass, and nodded. They went in. Their reflections scattered ahead and then came back to meet them. At the edge of the lot, where the asphalt frayed into crabgrass, Morales paused to look back. From here, the carnival looked like what it always wanted to be. Possibility. A place where you can be briefly larger than your life and then go home on time. She turned the mirror shard over in her pocket, felt its weight as if it carried a small gravity. Later, she would put it in a shallow frame on her bookcase, with a handwritten label tucked behind the glass. Not a trophy. A warning. When people asked, she'd tell them it was from a case about a man who thought reflections could hide him. When they asked how you beat someone like that, she'd say, you don't blink. You measure. You make habits that leave a trail and then you follow it, even when it's small. As she crossed to her car, her phone buzzed one more timbre this time. A photo of Pike's Forest at noon. Water flat as polished steel, pines standing like cathedral ribs. Thought you'd want to see the mirror without the monster, he typed. She held the phone up, let the carnival's lights bounce off the screen, and smiled the kind of smile you allow yourself when a long circle closes, not with fireworks, but with a working hinge. Behind her, the maze took a family in and returned them intact. The cameras wrote another uneventful hour into a database. The bulbs hummed. A rule sign fluttered in a slight breeze. Somewhere a prize bell dinged. Ordinary noises, exactly the right kind. Morales slid behind the wheel, and just before she turned the key, caught her reflection in the rear-view one face, steady, unmultiplied. For tonight, the glass did what it was meant to do. It told the truth and then minded its business. Tomorrow it would do it again. She drove away under a sky full of honest stars, leaving the carnival to its simple, hard-earned promise. Fun in public. Fear pushed to the corners. A labyrinth that now had more exits than excuses. Chapter 10, Reflections That Remain. The trial's final echo didn't come in a courtroom or a press conference. It arrived in the form of silence. For the first time in over 2 years, the name Daniel Harper was not spoken in the city's morning news cycle. The reporters had moved on. The front pages had traded blood and glass for budget debates and sports scores. The carnival had left town again, its wheel dismantled, its maze stacked into anonymous aluminum panels. But in the quiet, the case lived on not as headlines, but as a shape beneath the surface. Detective Lena Morales knew it. Prosecutor Koenig knew it. Hannah Lou knew it every time she stood in front of a reflective surface and checked, not her own face, but the edges behind her. Harper was in prison, serving life without parole. He would never see the inside of a mirror maze again. But that didn't erase the uncanny facts of him, a man declared dead 2 decades earlier, moving unnoticed among the living, cultivating anonymity as carefully as others cultivate fame. He had survived by existing in the blur between recognition and doubt, between "I'm sure that's him" and "maybe I imagined it." Morales kept the mirror shard in her office now, propped against a small wood block. Visitors assumed it was art, a piece of modern sculpture, a fragment of something larger. They weren't wrong. It was a piece of a structure built to mislead. But for Morales, it wasn't a reminder of Harper alone. It was proof of the fragility of certainty. In her downtime, she found herself replaying the CCTV clip, the one that had started the entire unraveling. Harper's reflection, distorted slightly by the angle of the mirror, had been enough for the software to suggest a name. But the human eye still had to decide whether to believe the machine. That decision, half instinct, half training, had been the turning point. Koenig, meanwhile, became something of a quiet advocate for forensic patients. In conferences, he spoke about the case without naming it, using it to illustrate the power of building a chain link by link, even when each link seemed fragile alone. A reflection is not a conviction, he'd say, but it can be the first nail in the door you keep open until the rest of the evidence walks through. As for the maze itself, when the carnival returned the next year, it didn't carry the same air of threat. Still, Morales noticed more parents accompanying their children inside. People lingered at the entrance to read the posted rules. The cameras were obvious now, not hidden, each one wearing a small placard, recorded live, monitored. And yet, the nature of the mirror never changed. Even on a sunny afternoon, the glass could still turn a hallway into an infinity. Still double and triple a stranger's presence until you weren't sure which way to turn. Morales walked it once more in daylight and thought of Harper's final words during sentencing. A mirror shows you what you want to see. That's the problem. The courtroom had been silent after he said it, not in awe, but in recognition. It was the closest Harper ever came to confessing that the weapon had never been the knife alone. It was the illusion. Months later, Morales was called to consult on a smaller case, nothing like the Harper investigation. Just a break-in where the suspect had tried to avoid security cameras. Reviewing the footage, she caught the glint of a glass picture frame in the corner of a hallway, and in it, a face turned away from the main lens, but visible in reflection. Not Harper, of course, but the principle was the same. She realized then that mirrors are everywhere, not just in carnivals, but in storefronts, polished floors, subway windows at night. Harper had treated the whole city as a maze, each reflective surface another opportunity to test whether he was still invisible. For 2 decades, he'd succeeded. Until one night under Carnival lights, he failed. The victim's family had chosen not to attend the sentencing. They had said their goodbyes at a private memorial, far from reporters and cameras. Morales respected that. Justice in court is one thing. Peace is another, harder thing entirely. Every so often, Morales still got emails from strangers who'd followed the case. They sent her grainy photos from fairs and carnivals and other towns' mirror mazes, fun houses, glass-walled attractions captioned with lines like, "Thought you'd want to know where the ghosts hide." She never replied, but she saved the images in a folder on her desktop labeled simply, Reflections. One evening in early autumn, Morales drove out to the edge of the city where the carnival had once stood. The lot was empty now, just gravel and weeds, but when the wind caught right, she could almost hear the distant organ music, the clatter of rides, the hum of a crowd. She parked, got out, and walked a slow circle around the space where the mirror maze had been. In her pocket, the shard pressed lightly against her palm. It wasn't sharp anymore, but it still caught the light, still gave her a tiny, incomplete picture of the world. She turned it over, watching the reflection change with each angle. For a moment, the sky above her fractured into 4 imperfect blues. Not a trophy, she whispered to herself again. A warning. Then she slid it back into her pocket and walked away. The crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound. Somewhere far off, a child's laugh carried on the wind a clean, unbroken sound. For Morales, that was enough.